right. Good morning. My name is Sarai Cook, and I'm the founder of the National Trauma Awareness Initiative. I'm a woman that's been formerly incarcerated. I'm also a mother. I'm also an attorney. Um, Today, we're here to talk about the value of community organizations. And what we're trying to do is to bring the invisible and make the invisible visible. And how are we doing that? We're doing that by telling our stories about how community organizations have helped us and how we need more community organizations because the community organizations are out in the community. So they're meeting the needs of the people that are out in the community right now. And when we come out of prison, we don't have, a lot of us don't have the resources to successfully reenter. So we need community organizations that can meet our needs. When I was released from prison in 2005, there were several community organizations that helped me. There weren't, unlike my guest, and she'll tell you more about the community organizations that helped her, there weren't really any community organizations. Actually, there was the Girl Scout program that allowed my daughter to be able to come in and visit me while I was incarcerated. And without the Girl Scout program, she wouldn't have been able to continue to have that bond with me. So that was a community organization that was active within the prison. And then once I got out, there were two main community organizations that helped me. And that was the Native American Recovery Association and Central City Concern. So the Native American Recovery Association was really important to me because it gave me culturally sensitive, culturally appropriate drug and alcohol treatment. It's very uncomfortable to go to a drug and alcohol treatment that isn't culturally sensitive for Native people, especially. I don't know about other folks, but I mean, I'm sure it's the same. The trust isn't there, the ability to be vulnerable, the ability to open up isn't there because we feel like people really just don't understand. I personally, if I was going to a non-Native place, I would probably interpret everything that they were doing as negative. So any help that they were sincerely trying to give me, I would interpret it as negative. I would interpret it as they were trying to control me. I would interpret it as I don't want your help. But having a culturally sensitive, culturally aware place with people that I respected really helped me to stay sober. It helped me to complete the program. It also helped to cement me within the community in that area and to participate in cultural activities, which is really, really important for reentry. Also, I went to get food stamps. I think it was my first week out. I went to sign up for food stamps at a place called Central City Concern. The woman at the front desk, she was the receptionist, the admin assistant. She knew me from prison and they were hiring. So she went and talked to the director for me and they hired me at Central City Concern. And that was really my first sort of office job and professional job. I got to learn how to teach classes there. You know, I've taught and done technical assistance all over the country at various levels of government, tribal government, federal government. But my start was at Central City Concern, teaching job readiness skills to people that were experiencing homelessness. That was really my start in seeing what that life is like of, you know, working in an office and not working manual labor or waitressing or any of those kinds of jobs, which I would burn out on really quickly. So that started me on my path to, you know, Portland Community College, University of Portland, University of Missouri Kansas City School of Law, and on and on. That community organization that offered me a job and benefits right out of prison. So Carolyn, I know that you have I don't know if it's similar or not, but I think it's really what we're wanting to do is, I think the effect that community organizations have on us when we're incarcerated and after we're incarcerated, they're not, I don't think it's making the invisible visible. It's making those helps visible. It's putting a name to them. It's putting a story to them. It's also letting them know that, how important they've been in our lives. Because I know that the IF project, for example, was really important in your life. And I know that that's something that you had encountered while you were incarcerated. So could you tell me a little bit more about that experience with the IF project and what it meant to you, and sort of guide me along how it impacted you, and do you think it impacted your reentry as well?
Did 100%. And, I think about, just what you were sharing is the limited number of female focused programs that there are inside of institutions. I don't remember what the national average is or the stat specifically, but it's somewhere between 75 and 85%, I believe, of incarcerated women are mothers. And one of the kind of maddening cultural norms as far as the legal system goes is that there is a fire truck. That would make sense. Timing. One of the cultural norms that we experience in our culture of legal engagement is on the front end of a sentencing agreement is that no one ever asks you if you have children. I would say to my chagrin, although it's really been one of the cosmic gifts of, long-term incarceration over decades, many iterations of Department of Corrections, is that I got to watch the transformation in that system. And seldom did it seem to be for the better. Is that over time, we were watching the rates of incarceration for women rise, and no systems in place to meet the need. And so, having never been, being whatever robbed me of engagement with children in a meaningful way prior to prison, it didn't get healed when I got locked up. And there was reading programs. You could read books to your children and send audio tapes. I think the first time that I was incarcerated, yoga behind bars existed. Angel Band would come in and you could send gifts to your children. Someone would sponsor you from prison and send gifts to your children in your name. But that only worked if you had access to the information of where your children were and had an address to send them to. And so otherwise, you were eliminated. And so, it really felt like it was these places where you got to see that experience led you to believe whether you were privileged or not. And it was contingent on your ability to be in compliance. If you weren't in compliance with programming, then those kinds of, opportunities were rescinded from you. There was a penal consequence even in that. And so, the IF project was one of those ones. And I saw it both times and that I had gone to prison. I'd been to prison twice. And the first time, and both times it was in the main institution. And I spent very little time in the main institution. They would do these overrides and send me to the work camp. And if programming didn't exist at the work camp, but it was one of those kind of, it was such an asset to the women in the community, is that if you could be allowed to be a part of IF, it felt like a privilege. It gave you real-time information about what was going on in the world, opportunities to resource and find out really where you landed as far as community assets. What would it look like to pull a credit report? What does it look like to clean up an eviction history? What does financial literacy look like? What is my story that brought me here? And if somebody could have said or done something to change the direction of my life, what would that have looked like? Someone asking me these questions. And I watched women, a mentor from the outside that would come and be on your visiting list, that would come and talk to you about what this transition into community could look like and to advocate on your behalf. It's that someone to help bridge your story into like law enforcement and corrections and employment. And if you've never had access to any of that stuff, to have somebody willing to speak on your behalf who could be your voice, be a voice for you, like that was really powerful. And I watched people be able to have it. And then of course you'd have to be, the need for that was so great that it was difficult to get involved in that program. I mean, if you weren't in the institution long enough, because you would have to be on a waiting list. And so like my first experience with the IF project really felt like a thing of longing. And so we'd end up at the little institution and it didn't exist. But the second time that I went to prison, IF came and brought their documentary. And I have a whole bunch of belief systems in relationship to the Department of Corrections and what policing is in my community as a woman of color. And you see it in really simple things. And I don't want this delivery to sound as though it should evoke pity or, this sense of victimization. But, I could watch the impact of equitable infraction, the way it was delivered to people of color and people who are not of color. I could do the same thing as somebody who was white. And there would be, they would look away when that happened, or they would try to find a way to negotiate with you. And if you were a woman of color, you just got infracted. And so, and what that teaches you, not this idea around, I can be in compliance, but it won't transform me. Is that I'll do what you say while you're looking. But I know that the system is not equitable. So that means that I have to find ways to navigate my own world. And it doesn't matter if it's authentic and it doesn't matter if it's honest. I just need to be able to create a way for myself to have access to some resource.
Okay, and let me paraphrase what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
You're making the connection between the IF project and the way people are. So the Department of Correction is sort of trying to teach pro-social skills.
Yes.
Okay, so the Department of Corrections is trying to teach pro-social skills, and they do that through reward and punishment.
Yes.
But as a woman of color in that system, whether they mean to or not, but how it lands is that they're penalizing certain people more than others, and so based on bias. So within that, it doesn't teach you anything because it's not fair.
Right. Okay. And real or imagined. I want to be really clear. Real or imagined. If you're experiencing, it's real to you. And being somebody who is generally, introverted, is as gregarious as I may be, I tend to be introverted. And so when I'm impacted, my expression is not out, I go inward and but it's also been the gift is that learning how to be a witness from my own experience and what my environment teaches me. And so having all of this relationship with corrections and experiencing these biases is the IF project comes in and they do this documentary. And to date, still one of the most powerful experiences that I have watched with engagement with corrections, policing, and particularly women of being incarcerated. And Detective Kim Baguki, she had come and brought some gals in with her who are part of the IF project to be a part of the panel, who were doing really magnificent, formerly incarcerated women doing powerful work in the community. And so work that really historically we have been told, whether by community or institution, that as a result of your particular infraction, you don't have access to this kind of resource or power or connection in community. And
here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that when people
we believe it. We believe it.
And they only have to tell us once.
That's it.
You or hear it once, and then it comes on you like a barrier in your mind. Yeah. And we don't even think to question it. We don't even think to push back against it. We don't even think it's just oh, I can't do that. And it could be a totally ill-informed, uninformed, it usually is, person that doesn't know what the heck they're talking about.
Yep.
So, yeah.
100%. And the thing is that the stink of that'll be on you, because if you plant the seed in me, it will take root. And so as I present myself to you, I already am coming into this engagement with this belief system. So I'm not actually looking for signs that that you're going to engage with me in a meaningful and positive way. I'm actually looking for signs that this isn't going to work. And so I'll miss any cues that you're giving me, telling me that I'm in alignment with this thing, because of, these deep-seated belief systems that I don't have access to power or community or connection or resource or abundance. And so, if came in and they brought this panel of women who were doing meaningful work into the community. They were connected to them. They told us about this process. We watched this documentary that they did over the course of 10 years, following these women through institution. And by the end, and like Kim was there the whole time, and they were doing writing workshops inside the institution, evoking powerful, they were telling our story, and not from the lens of corrections, but the lens of the individual. And it wasn't designed to evoke shame or pity. It was a question, as they were asking a question, and it was told from this lens of genuinely being interested, and giving women an opportunity to tell the real story of its impact, and then like what the desire of like what life could look like differently. And so, and they followed women all the way to the end of their penitentiary sentences, into freedom. And when it was over, like I looked around and I was at that time very difficult to show emotional, expression, particularly in public. Like I'd rather be run over by a streetcar than cry in public. But like tears, I couldn't stop the tears from pouring down my face. And I'm looking around, I'm in a gymnasium full of women, and there's tears pouring down everybody's face. I'll cry right now just thinking about it. And
why? Was it the hope?
It was hope. It was being seen. It was like being seen for the first time. Like I'm in this environment that you're not allowed to make mistakes without a penal consequence. Compliance is mandatory. I am never allowed to make a decision for myself in any real or meaningful way. I can't question the authority. I am literally aligned with the system till the day that they release me, and it's contingent on my ability to have them believe that I'm reformed. They're banking on remorse as a transformation experience, not education, nothing. Is that like that you will be sorry enough for this experience that it will scare you from coming back here. And but you're not seen. As a matter of fact, if you're seen, it's because you've done something to be.
When you say seen, I feel like what you're saying is with the If Project and watching the movie, when you're saying seen, you're saying the entire circumstances around incarceration and women being incarcerated. Yeah. So it's not just you at that moment, or it's like being your experience being highlighted, because we all have a lot of the same experiences and a lot of the same feelings, a lot of the same contributing factors to our incarceration. Yep. So is that what you're saying? I'm just trying to.
Yes. And
when you say what do you mean?
It's that that I, as a woman, am more than the thing that brought me to prison. Is that I'm a mother and a daughter, and then I'm filled with light and have dreams. I have regret and potential, and part of what impacted me about like Kim's presence, but specifically, is that they were asking what they could do, and I don't want to say that she was claiming fault, but she was taking responsibility. Is that I have an opportunity to make impact here too, and what could I do to make this be different? It's that, and I'd never seen that in corrections before. It's like that you care, and that that like you want to take responsibility for potentially having a part in this transformation, maybe even the problem. And it felt like the truth to me. It was like, and what it shifted for me is maybe this ideal that I've had about who, it was the first time I saw like police as human. One of the first times it was like, oh, like this is a person on the other side of this, experience, this engagement. Always they had just seemed like a barrier, a threat even.
Yeah.
And so, I walked up and I said, hi, my name is Carolyn. And, it's a sea of khaki. I don't look different than anyone else. And I said, I don't, that was probably the most, amazing thing that I've seen in a long time. You like completely changed my heart. I don't know how to be a part of what you're doing, but I really want to be. She gave me some information about how to connect to them on the outside. And I moved on, and the person behind me came up and, shared their experience. And I thought, again, I don't know if this landed anywhere or not, but like, it literally, I could feel this perceptible shift in my interior. It resonated with me for days. Like maybe there's a place that when I walk out this door, because the first time I walked out of prison, it was like, here's $40 gate money. Don't forget to report. Good luck. It was just like, I didn't have a home to go to. I didn't have anything. And I thought, I don't know how I'm going to make this work. And I thought there might be some place that I can go when I walk out who will help. Not having any resources because I'm leaving everything that I've known before, which is directly connected to criminal engagement and drug and alcohol use and deep, dark corners, pockets of the world. Like I've left and gone to prison. And like, that's the only thing I know on the outside. Really, I got some family, but they don't trust me. There's no reason for them to. I haven't done anything trustworthy. And so, and then I got out and I wasn't able to connect with them directly because I couldn't do programming with them inside the institution. And because I hadn't programmed inside, they didn't have an outside component. Usually you just connected inside prison. And I was like, but I, because I couldn't actively engage in their programming, I was like, well, I don't necessarily need the resource, although I would like to just be connected to you if there's any way that I can like volunteer or be a part of what you're doing. And they ended up at a halfway house that I was at. And we started having conversations. At that time, Amber Flame was their program director. And we were talking about maybe ways we could engage in the community, but wasn't sure if it was going to land anywhere. And then ultimately I ended up, a year or two later, a couple years, as the female housing coordinator for Wild Seattle. Then I oversaw all their women's clean and sober housing. That was my job. I acted as a bridge between the community and the institution for women who were coming home. And they said, oh yeah, we just, we're going to go down to the IF project office. We just kind of developed a partnership with them and we're going to go and have a sit down. I thought, how ironic, dude. How ironic. Like this thing in my heart was like, how do I connect to this organization? And through the divinity of the cosmic universe, I end up sitting at a table across from Kim Baguki talking about what a partnership with IF and my organization could look like in creating opportunity for service for our women. So that they had women coming home who needed a place to live. And I was working for an organization that provided housing. And that was like the first engagement. And I got to partner with her team over the next couple of years, doing exactly that. And it's not, it's bigger than housing. It's bigger than employment. It's like, what does it look like when I've been a parent that's away from my children? How do I re-engage with the family who's, the care providers in a way that develops trust so that I can even have access to seeing my children? How do I clear out all of the shame, grief, and remorse in my interior landscape so that I am not so, that I'm not bringing my fear and my shame to the table, but like my hope and my opportunity of what these relationships could look like. And it's so much more than just like people think you throw some exterior resource at it and it's going to get better. But if I don't have the internal capacity to receive the thing that you're giving, it just lands on fallow ground. Like it can't take root and so like having these conversations, I share it a lot. It's that the hands and the feet are always going to be able to do the task. That's not the problem. The fear is always the barrier. Like those first engagements And, you know, it's like, and I was a mother who had been away from their children really emotionally and psychologically for 15 years. You know, I'd be physically available, but emotionally I wasn't. I didn't know my kids' favorite colors or who their best friends were in third grade. You know, they would sit and have conversations amongst each other, and I didn't get the joke because it was an internal language that I hadn't been present for. And Facebook, my first Christmas out, Facebook, I'm watching families share their Christmas histories and pictures of their kids when they were little. And I felt like a thief. I felt like I had robbed my children of memories and that there were things that I could never get back. And it was like, and I would go to visit, and every time I would walk away and I feel more and more like an alien, like I didn't know them. And like my commitment was that, like, no matter what, if I have to, every engagement feels like the first time, then I'm going to go there expecting that every engagement is like the first time. And it took years really my daughter was, you know, she was gentler and more forgiving. She'd just really always been an ally of that stuff. She had just hoped that I would come back. My son was really wounded and told me so. I don't trust you. I don't feel about you the way that a kid should feel about their mom. As a matter of fact, really, anytime I see you, I feel guilty because it reminds me of how much I don't know you. And being able to hold space to have those conversations with them and hear them without turning to some other thing for some relief. Is that like, okay, that's true. And I get to have acceptance of that fact. Do I have permission to orbit your life in a way that's meaningful in the attempt to garner some trust? I can't make you any promises that this is forever. Like, I can promise you that I'll show up today the best way I know how. And
what specifically were the resources and the assistance? I call it like resilient. You know, we talk about trauma. We inform people about and raise awareness around trauma with the National Trauma Awareness Initiative. Mm-hmm. And in my research, one of the big factors in how much trauma affects a person is their ability to access resiliency measures. You know, so community support systems, therapies, just outlets, healthy outlets, friendships. So in saying that, what were the resiliency tools that you had to get you to a point where you could do what you're just saying, talking about being there and showing up when it's really hard to show up for your kids emotionally because there's so much guilt and shame around that. So what were the resiliency tools that you utilized to come to a place where you could do that? Because I'm right after like when you first got out or when you were in, you couldn't do that, right? No. But you came to a place or a process. But that it takes help. No, none of us can do that on our own. We cannot move from A to B on our own. We have to have help. So what were the helps that
I think probably the most dominant resource that I used was peer support, like folks who had a history that was like mine, who I could hear. I didn't have to do a bunch of explaining about who I was or how I arrived where I was, what they knew the story already because they had one that mirrored it, is that they were interested in what I was willing to do. And I had to be able to say yes to it. You know, it's like in the same way that I had difficulty crying, I had a difficult time asking for help. I have a whole narrative around accepting help and letting you down. And I can't bear it because it breaks my own heart. That complete fear of success is that if this works, then it means that my life is going to change. And that means like walking into the unknown all the time. It's always, you know, I didn't understand that like being in life is being a student no matter what. But even in, you know, criminal lifestyle, it's like as torturous and dark as that can be, I'm an expert there. I don't have to ask a bunch of questions about how to navigate it. And it's like coming into the world was like being an alien landing on a new planet. It was like, I don't know how any of this works, and feeling really ignorant and vulnerable. And so being able to have people in my corner where I go, yeah, and who would just kind of tell my story just in like painting a picture of what we're doing today. I was like, those are all the things right there. And it's like and I can trust that if you know how to navigate this, then maybe I can navigate it too. So I want to say that peer support was probably the main one.
I remember going into a pre-law program. So it's called the Pre-Law Summer Institute. It's native people that are going to law school. And it's a huge opportunity. The first two Native congresswomen that were elected in the country went to this program, Pre-Law Summer Institute, PLSI. Lots of judges, politicians, people that do huge things in Indian country and just in the country in general go to this program. Well, so I have a bachelor's degree. I'm accepted to law school. I'm going to law school. And I don't know simple terms like what a cohort means. Yeah. I don't know simple like sort of academic language. I just sit there and pretend like I'm like, what was that word? So I'm still here. I'm still trying to figure out what simple words mean.
100%.
And that sort of what you said invoked this in my mind when you said, I don't know how to do all this. I know how to do all that. I know how to do the criminal, like being in that world. But in this new world, like I don't even know the language. And I was even in it for years and still didn't know so many things.
I feel like I'm holding up. I often felt like I was holding up the whole soul train because I mean, in a simple paragraph, I need to have you define several of those components so that I know what direction the flow of this conversation. I don't even like, how do I make a contribution? And that in relationship to what you were talking about is like this deep core fundamental part of our being as humans, I think, is that I want to feel like I can make impact. I want to feel like I can make a contribution to this that is meaningful and useful, contributive. And but if I can't speak the language, I don't know how to contribute. And that thing of feeling like I'm separate, like that was the thing that led me into all of that other behavior, lifestyle stuff anyways, is because I felt separate and I wanted to feel connected. And so like, how do I come back into this thing to where I can make a contribution? And so, programs like the IF Project and Weld Seattle.
And you know how I can get that feeling real quick?
How?
Drugs and alcohol.
100%.
It's going to go away in a few hours, but I could at least feel it for a few minutes. The
sense of ease and comfort that comes at once from a drink. And it may not even correct to the problem. What it makes it is that I become numb to it. I no longer care.
I had to fight through that feeling for so many years, 7 years of my education, which actually took me like 10. So 10 years, constantly having that feeling of dis-ease, constantly having that feeling of I'm an outsider here, I don't belong here. My mind constantly having the thoughts of fear, anger, not belonging,
an imposter,
constant imposter syndrome, which for someone like me that has a lot of trauma, constant fight or flight.
Constant.
And it just kept me, I'm really lucky that I never went back to prison, but it just kept me in a really bad place for, just trying to fight through those walls of, gaining a foothold, gaining an entrance into normal society.
Yeah. And when you're doing those things simultaneously to being an employee and a parent and trying to cultivate relationships with people in community, but my like the background vibration is fight and flight, fear and trauma, fight and flight, fear and trauma. So everything that's meaningful in my life is impacted by like this fear response that I'm having to just trying to be a part of. And so, connecting to community resources, like particularly reentry resources, like
but that hope will make you fight. The hope
will make you fight. And having an advocate, man, is that I need to know that I'm not doing this alone.
And there was always a person that showed up right when I really wanted to quit and I really thought there was no freaking way forward. Someone showed up and was like, this is easy. Here's how you do it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't me figuring it out, because me with my own mind, can't figure out my own problems. I can figure out everybody else's problems, but I can't figure out my own problems. I need someone to come figure mine out.
Well, and like the force of change, what would happen is at these moments where I would feel these experiences, real change happening, which always made me uncomfortable because I couldn't predict where we were heading. And then I would have these these really monumental experiences about choice. It's like the fear would tell me that like, this isn't going to work for you. I don't know why you're trying. You need to evacuate. As a matter of fact, this environment is threatening and it's probably just it's a trick. You're really not going to win here. And it was like, and then choosing to persevere. It was like, all right, like I'm afraid, but I just need to see what's on the other side of it. Then my world would open up and I would have those experiences over and over again. Like there's this, that kitschy little saying is like, don't give up 5 minutes before the miracle. All my life, I'd given up 5 minutes before the miracle. It would be, and I would see it, like I would make this choice and everything that I had been afraid about was going to play out. But because I had made the negative choice, it's like I didn't have access to it anymore. And of course it would break my heart. And it was like, of course I don't ever get what I want. It would be that story that I would tell myself. And so it was like, that thing is like, just like walking through it, Carolyn. And I had to tell the truth to people. I was like, I'm totally afraid and I don't know what I'm doing at all. And I really need someone to help me with it. And then, but my part is that I had to be willing to show up for it. I had to accept the help and be able to follow somebody's suggestions when I couldn't see that the direction that they were giving was really going to bear any fruit. As a matter of fact, it felt like an exercise in folly. It was like being able to trust is such a challenging experience. It's a free fall. And I, having had a relationship with just not being able to trust my environment, of course, because of where I was at, but like, I just deeply didn't trust my ability to make decisions for my own well-being. And so like now I'm in an environment where I don't understand the world and the language. And I don't have a history of being able to trust myself to make a good choice. And now I have to trust you. And so like, people think about it. I think about like being the barrier of my own mind and my belief systems. And it wasn't a one and done. I didn't just like, oh, I want things to be better. And like, there's these choices and I'm just going to do that. It was literally kind of a choice a day kind of thing, is that I'm going to pick a thing to work on today. And that's going to be my focus. And not only am I going to do the task, but I'm going to be really mindful of my heart. And I'm going to be really mindful of my thinking when I make this choice. It was like, what if you behaved as though this were true? And what if you behaved as though like the thing you dream about is possible? Instead of looking for all of the things that were wrong with it, is to begin to try to practice looking for the things that were right. Yeah.
So do you believe this statement, everything is mind?
Everything is mind?
Like everything is controlled through our mind and like where we put our perceptions. And
I do. I think
go good and if things go bad and if things, it's like
my thinking.
This is a very powerful tool.
Yes.
This is a very powerful.
Yes.
So
I believe that my thinking guides my actions.
So if that's true, you may not be able to answer this, but I guess what's been the most impactful thing for you in changing your mind and changing your thinking and changing your actions? Yeah, it is. It's beliefs. It's our belief system. And then it's our thinking. And then it's our actions and how that plays out and everything from there. But it looks like it's everything else.
Yeah.
So how did you realize that? How did you start to realize that?
Well, I I'm a woman in recovery. So, I engaged with communities that were recovery focused. And, and so I did it in the same way as that I got a mentor and I began to stop looking at the problem of the world because I was mad about a bunch of stuff. I was wounded about a bunch of stuff. But when I was invited to look at it, it's like that thing that you're talking about that is breaking your heart, Carolyn. That thing actually happened 30 years ago. And so you were still making choices based on something that has long passed. And so for me, it was really important to start mapping out my interior about the way that I perceived myself, the way that I thought the world perceived me. And if those things were true to me, then what was I afraid of? and what my ambitions and my sense of security was, taking responsibility and having a realization that these things that I was so frustrated by or angry about, I was actually perpetuating that stuff in the world, sometimes, even in a predatory way, because I was victimized. Then I'm not responsible for how I show up anymore. Because this thing happened, I don't have to be accountable for my own behavior, and telling myself the truth about that. And like, somebody walked me through that. And then like looking at, when I'm afraid, what are my behaviors? And I lie, or I steal, or I gossip, or I punish, or I rescind love. It was like, these are the engagements that I'm impacted by the way that I think about whatever these things are. And then having an opportunity to sit down with somebody and really map out what it would look like to heal that. Because I had done some stuff and I was responsible for it, but I never had gone and taken responsibility for the things that I'd done, like restitution, interior restitution. Like, how do you amend that? And like, not looking to be let off the hook, but to just, in some ways, go and tell people, let other people off the hook. Go, hey, like, this thing that was going on, like, you're not, I'm not holding you responsible for you. I'm taking responsibility for me. And like, it was my first access to like being in my own power.
And like, so for me, I'm in recovery now, but I wasn't the entire time from when I got out of prison to, just a few years ago. And so I had to struggle through that entire time of, getting my education, having a career, going all over the country and the world, doing with the imposter syndrome, in fight or flight, with all my my barriers and my mental barriers, and it was torture. And I don't know how I did it. I don't know how people ask me how I did it, and I'm like, well, it's not fun. Life, I don't just want to live, I want to thrive.
Yeah.
And I was just living, and I was somehow making it, and I don't know how I was doing it. But when we start to understand, utilize our resources, so what are our resources? Community programs, other people in the community, peer support, help from others, and accept that, and show our real selves, and we can start to work through that. We can thrive and not just survive.
Well said.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited. Can you tell just a little bit about what you're doing with the probation parole folks and peer support?
Well, one of the things that we were doing initially when I was signed on with Seattle is that we partner with the Department of Corrections, not in the sense that we're mandatory reporters, but we are an approved housing vendor because of the model, recovery and abstinence based, which, dominantly folks who are coming out of incarceration have struggled with drugs and alcohol in the past. And so, people that were coming through our housing program were not recidivating. They weren't going back, and or violations, or if there was, that we acted as a bridge and an advocate to create, kind of agreements and contracts about what it would look like to get back on track. So instead of taking this, man or woman back to jail, we have a plan for this, and will you allow us to help them execute it? In the agreement, you guys do whatever you need to do on your end contractually, and we will try to support this person with resources in the community to kind of flip around whatever this setback has been. And so as a result of that, that partnership we began to create trust between us and corrections in that way. And now we are working with federal probation. They send their folks coming out of incarceration to our employment program, Wild Works. And so, and there's been some success in direct to work experiences. Not everybody needs a house when they get out, but everybody needs a job. And the provision of wraparound services and dedicated peer mentors, so that people aren't just coming in. It's like, come in and get a job, but we kind of incentivize, like, why don't you sit down and talk to this cat about what's going on? And now it's not even anything that we have to do.